Roland Avery Hall was born on July 1st, 1912 in Atlanta. He is significant to soaring in Georgia in that he was an early promoter of soaring and started the first glider clubs in this state. Avery's first exposure to soaring was as a teenager, seeing an article in a 1929 National Geographic magazine featuring European gliders. The article sparked a fascination of flying in the young man. While attending Riverside Academy in Gainesville, Avery began construction of a primary glider in the basement of the dining hall at the school. They didn't get very far with the project, and when he graduated, the project was left behind. Avery went to Georgia Tech in 1930 to study aeronautical engineering. In 1932, his junior year at Tech, he met Bruce Craig from Selma, Alabama, who was also studying aeronautics. Bruce had two friends in Selma that co-owned a single-place Franklin PS2 glider, and he had them bring the utility glider to Atlanta that fall. They set up a one-day glider school and gave ground tow instruction at Candler Field. Seated in the glider, the students were pulled along the ground behind the car to help them become familiar with the glider's controls. Let's hear Avery's account of his first glider ride.
And they gave us ground tows across the field. In fact, we were at Candler Field in those days. We were back on the back side of it where we didn't interfere with the airplanes. And we had a full day of ground tows on it. It was at that time that first time I ever got off the ground of flying anything myself, because on one of the ground tows, a little gust of wind hit and I rose to a height of about 2 feet. I'll never forget that thrill of saying, gee, I'm flying.
After graduating from Tech in 1934, Avery learned that there was a Meade primary glider for sale at a high school in Birmingham, Alabama. It had been built in the manual arts class as a project. When it was completed, no one dared to try and fly it, so the glider sat there in its new condition and was now for sale for $125. In January of 1935, Avery brought the glider back from Birmingham and started the Georgia Glider Club with 4 other graduates from Tech. He made arrangements to fly the glider off of a small dirt airstrip on Hightower Road near downtown. Let's hear Avery's account of the club's flying that year.
We officially got started then in the winter of 1935 with the 5 of us. Now, except for the ground tows at Candler Field, which a few of us had, none of us had ever flown anything. So we really started from scratch, you might say behind scratch, with automobile tow, using about 200 feet of rope. And of course, we could only get about 50 feet altitude and still land straight ahead because there was no suitable places on the side of the strip. It was only about 100 feet wide. And so we had to do all of our flying and taking off and landing straight ahead. So we were pretty limited in what we could do. Now, later on, as we became more proficient, we got a longer rope, about a 400-foot rope. And with that, we could reach altitude of 250 to 300 feet, I guess. And that was the biggest thrill of my life, at least, if not for the rest of us, because when we used a long rope, we and reached a height of about, say, 300 feet, we were too far down the runway to land straight ahead. And so we were committed to at least a 180-degree turn, which meant we had had to do something we'd never done before, and come back and land downwind on the strip there. So I'll never forget the first time I made that flight. It just seemed like I was thousands of feet in the air, much higher than I've ever been before. And of course, as I got that height, the apparent motion of the plane slowed down as it does, and it was quite an eerie feeling. I mean, I knew I was moving, but it didn't look like I was. But I made it around all right, and one by one, all the rest of us soloed, quote unquote, because every flight was a solo in that. And we made our 180-degree turn. And later on, as we got more proficient, we would make a 360 and land in the same direction. Believe it or not, we even carried passengers on several flights. As you know, primary glider is fuselage consists mainly of a wooden or steel tubing truss, just a single width truss, and it's made up of triangular sections or openings in the truss. So we found that by a bit of acrobatics, uh, one of us could squeeze into the triangular truss just behind the pilot and be approximately over the center of gravity. And so we made several flights that way, carrying a passenger, and it really affected the flying of it because it came down like a corkscrew. It had just barely enough uh, time to turn and then flare, but after the turn. And as I look back on it, I wonder at the bravery of those guys that flew with me because I never flew with anybody else in that triangle.
In the summer of 1935, on the last flight of the day, Avery landed long, intending to roll out near the hangar. He didn't stop in time and struck the hangar with one of the wings, breaking the spar. With members now scattering to start careers and families in different parts of the country, the club was disbanded and the glider sold. This ended the activities of the Georgia Glider Club, the first soaring club in Georgia. Avery moved to California and went to work at North American Aircraft as an engineer. While there, Avery purchased a Franklin PS-2 glider that had been crashed. An aviation ground school agreed to make the repairs for the cost of materials only as part of the teaching course, and Avery had his PS-2 repaired, naming it Aeolus, after the Greek god of the wind. Avery spent all of his free time flying his glider in different areas out west. He made some remarkable flights along the rocky cliffs of the California coast, where he earned his C badge. Avery moved back to Atlanta in 1939 and learned of an Eastern Airline pilot, a Shelley Charles, who was flying gliders in Atlanta. He got in touch with Shelley and started promoting gliding in Atlanta. Around Christmas of 1939, Avery organized the Southern Soaring Association by advertising in the Atlanta paper and holding the first meeting at a downtown hotel. The new group flew Avery's Franklin glider, headquartering the organization in the basement of an auto repair garage at the corner of Highland and Boulevard. There they had a small shop where they built gliders and had storage for 2 gliders and a tow car. At that time, they operated mainly out of the Griffin Airport. Using a 600-foot rope and auto tow, they could reach an altitude of about 400 feet. Most of the flights were quick glides around the pattern, but occasionally they would catch a thermal and remain aloft for as long as an hour and a half. Landing out was quite common in those days, resulting in some interesting retrieves with club members lifting the plane over fences and towing the glider fully assembled down country roads back to the airport. It was around this time in 1940 that Shelley Charles bought his Minimoa and built a tow winch that was used at Griffin. With Shelley's connections at the Atlanta airport, the group was also able to make aerotow flights from the Atlanta field, much to the chagrin of the tower operators. The group also made outings to other airports. In the fall of 1940, they took the Franklin to Cartersville in the pursuit of possible ridge lift from a nearby hill. Avery had numerous soaring articles published in the Atlanta newspaper, further promoting the sport to the masses. In the summer of 1941, with the imminent entry of the U.S. into the war in Europe, almost all recreational flying ended because of fuel and materials rationing. Avery put his Franklin in storage and was stationed at Pensacola Naval Air Station. During the war, when they weren't able to fly, Avery continued to contribute to soaring by writing technical articles for Soaring magazine. In 1942, his Franklin glider was actually featured on the cover. After the war, Avery sold the Franklin to Shelley Charles and left aeronautics to go into research. In the 1980s, Avery chronicled the early history of soaring in Georgia and gave presentations to different groups. In 1987, he was given an award by the National Soaring Museum for outstanding achievement for his recount of soaring in Georgia during the period from 1928 to 1945. Avery passed away at the age of 89 on April 5, 2002 in Toccoa, Georgia.